Good morning. We only have one projector today, so you all have to look in that direction. Can you do that? As you heard, our topic for this morning, our theme for the whole year has been values-based spiritual living. And so each month we've been looking at a spiritual value and focusing on that for the whole month. And now these values they're not randomly chosen. They come from our organization, Centers for Spiritual Living. These values are articulated in our organizational design model that says what our movement is all about. And this month's value is integrity. So we've been looking at that all month. As you heard, we're using the book, If You Know Who You Are, You'll Know What to Do by Ronald Greer to guide us through the exploration. And so far, we've been talking about the different kinds of integrity. Personal integrity, that's when what I say matches the way I show up in the world. It's symmetrical. Then there is moral integrity. And that's when I do something because it's the right thing to do and something inside of me knows that. And so I do it. And then we talked about spiritual integrity. That's when I stay true to my spiritual path when it's convenient and also when it's not. Then we also talked about this idea from our teaching at the Center for Spiritual Living, the Science of Mind, the idea that you and I are hardwired for goodness, which is why everything else fails. And like it says in Romans, the letter to the Romans, it's written in our heart already. It's there. We don't have to create it. We don't have to become more spiritual. We get to live in harmony with what is already present in our hearts. And he talks about the qualities of integrity and how we can use them in the form of a question to strengthen our own spiritual integrity. Here's what he lists as the qualities of integrity: compassion, truthfulness, kindness, tolerance, avoiding harm, humility, and I added to the list goodness. And the way of using them in the form of a question is when we're dealing with something in life, a difficult situation, a crisis situation, disharmony at home, a career change, dealing with a grumpy neighbor, or something like that, we can ask, what would compassion have me do in this situation? What role will truthfulness play when I deal with this? Is there a way for me to bring kindness into the situation? What would tolerance look like? And is there a way, as I walk through this, that I can avoid harm? What does humility look like for me in this thing that I'm dealing with right now? What would goodness have me do? Another way to use these qualities are to contemplate them, to saturate our consciousness with them. Contemplate them, by that I mean think about them. Like get up in the morning and spend some time, just sit down, and you can be creative with this. Tomorrow morning, take the first quality and sit quietly in some unstructured, silent time. And then ask yourself questions like, for example, if I were asked to write an article for the local newspaper about compassion, and I only had 300 words, what would I say? What would be the most important thing for me to articulate? Or if I was invited to go and spend some time with the teen group that meets next door over here and talk to them about compassion, what role models would I share with them that affected me to be more compassionate? What examples of compassion in my life would I be able to share with them? It's great. And then the next day, I can start all over, be creative again, and ask myself about truthfulness. And if I do that every day with the next quality and the next quality, it'll take 1 week to do all 7. And if I do that for 4 weeks, very soon my consciousness is going to be saturated with the contemplation of the qualities of integrity. And the way of consciousness is that what we saturate our consciousness with, we gradually become. And chances are you and I are already saturating our consciousness with something. So you might as well have a choice about what you want to go inside, especially when I consider that is what may be shaping me. Now the author goes on, takes it deeper, and he explores the role of courage in living a life of integrity. And courage he defines this way. Courage is when we are who we are, even when risk is present. So I spent some time yesterday on the internet looking up stories of great acts of courage. Oh my, they're everywhere. They're wonderful. They're amazing. I read about the story of the teenager in Canada who climbed over the back of a big, I think it was a big rig. It was hanging over a precipice about to go in. And while everybody else was standing around waiting for the police and emergency vehicles to come, he climbed on and broke into the back of the window to retrieve the driver, and then the rig went over. I think that's what happened. Or the story of the young man who saw a car in a flooding river with the water rising, and he realized the water was pressing up against the door and the woman inside couldn't get out. And he knew that if he left her there, she was going to drown, was going to rise and drown her. And so what he did was he, first of all, got his cell phone out and called his mom and said, "Mom, I love you, and I'm going in." Isn't that something? No, that's a beautiful story. And the afterward, when they met together later and bonded over that rescue, is just beautiful. Or the story of the woman who stopped an angry mob from beating a man to death by throwing her body over his body, a complete stranger, and shouted out, "Don't hurt him." Courage is when I follow my conviction, whatever the cost. Now, interestingly, people who commit these great acts of courage, heroic acts, when interviewed later, they are filled with genuine humility. Because in many cases, they don't see what they did as being particularly heroic. In some cases, it almost seems that they didn't have a choice because they were acting on what was written in their heart. So we might say they knew who they were, so they knew what to do. Well, it is the case that we don't always know what is written in our hearts or who we are until there is a moment of extreme crisis or danger. And then it comes forward. But it's occurring to me this month as we study integrity that we don't have to wait for moments of crisis to discover what we stand for. There is another way we can explore what our values are. And interestingly, these people who commit these great acts of courage, it doesn't mean that they weren't afraid while they were doing it. Indeed, the author says courage isn't the absence of fear. How does he say it? He says it's what we do with love that is outwardly focused on others in the presence of fear. In other words, being courageous can be unpleasant, challenging. It's filled up with questioning and indecision. I mean, I could experience loss. Should I do it? It could make me unpopular. Should I do it? I could fail. I might not be equal to the task. I might not be enough. So courage is staying true to my path, whatever the cost. Now, as you heard in the reading, when the cost is low, Oh, it's far easier to live with integrity. But when risk is present and the cost may be higher, that may call for courage. So it's worth looking at that. When is the cost low? Well, when things are going well. Got enough money to pay my bills. I'm in love. My political party has won the election. I can be kind. I can have compassion. I can have tolerance for those other people. I can be humble, sort of. But it's when the cost is high that comes into question, and the cost is high when it's just the opposite. Things are not going so well. Now can I stay true to these qualities? I don't have enough money. I'm struggling. Maybe my heart is breaking, and maybe I'm working through a difficult disillusion. Maybe my political party didn't win, and I'm conflicted. Now can I stay true to the path and be compassionate and truthful and avoid harm and have humility? Or am I going to drift? We talked about that in the previous 2 weeks. The drifting that happens slowly over time when I stop paying attention to what is written on my heart and I start responding to the world according to the ways of the world. Drifting. So courage is the ability to act rightly, it says in Wikipedia, in the face of opposition, shame, scandal, discouragement, personal loss. I can't help but think of Luke 6, where it says, "Bless those who curse you, and pray for those who despitefully use you." I was reading the online magazine Psychology Today, and it lists 6 qualities of courage, each with a quote illustrating the quality from a well-known teacher, author, or leader. The first one is this: feeling fear, but acting anyway. And the quote is from Nelson Mandela. "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." Well, I am not Nelson Mandela, and I have not had to triumph over some of the conditions that he had to in his lifetime, and I wonder if I could. Nevertheless, I look into my own life and into the lives of people in our community, and I see there are many moments of feeling the fear and acting anyway on a different level. I'm just thinking about my very first job interview. Do you remember yours? Quaking. I'm remembering the first time I asked somebody out on a date. It's not on a world-shaping level, but I understand the need to step forward and be in the world even when I'm quaking. The second condition is following your heart, and the quote comes from Steve Jobs. It says, "And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become." Well, the best way I know to foster a relationship with my heart and what's written on it and my intuition, which, by the way, our founder Ernest Holmes says intuition is that part inside of us where the cosmic mind intersects with ours. That's where we are in tune with the universe. The best way I know to have a relationship with that and court it is through unstructured, silent time alone, sitting and listening, like I suggested earlier on. And why might that need courage? Well, because when we finally do get quiet enough to listen to what is in there, it might surprise us. It might be different to the direction I'm currently traveling. It might be different to the way society is moving. And to agree with it and go with it has a certain amount of risk. The third condition is carrying on, even though adversity may be present. Keep going. Marianne Radmacher became famous through this meme. She wrote, "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the little voice at the end of the day that says, I'll try again tomorrow." Oh, I like that, because when I hear the word courage, sometimes it conjures up images of physical strength and overcoming huge setbacks. And it's nice to know that it can also be small and tender, too. You know, like the first time I admitted to myself that I needed to do some forgiveness work and couldn't. So I'll try again tomorrow. And then coming to it tomorrow and realizing I still can't do it. I'm filled up with resentment for the fact that I should have to do it anyway. And I'll try again tomorrow. And then eventually doing it and feeling all those feelings that might want me to not do it. Or like the time when in high school I decided I had to tell my best friend that I was gay. I had to, because part of who I wasn't being shared with him, and I felt dishonest and incomplete and terrified to tell him. Because the stakes were high. I could lose a friend. I knew what the possibilities were, and so I would try. I would get myself ready to say something, and then that night I'll try again tomorrow. Quaking, I would sit behind him thinking, I'll tell him today. Then have to go home and say, I'll do it again tomorrow. I'll try. And then I remember one day I worked up the courage, and literally I couldn't hold my hand still, and I tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Peter, there is something I have to tell you." And he turned around and he said, "Yes, Edward, you're gay, I know." Thanks, Peter. The fourth condition, standing up for what is right. The quote comes from children's writer N.D. Wilson, who wrote Dandelion Fire. He says, "The great heroes stand because it is right to do so, not because they believe that they will walk away with their lives." That's big. See, because I've always wanted the guarantee that I'll be okay if I do the right thing. The great heroes stand because it is right to do so, not because there is a guarantee that they will come out unscathed. And I can admit to you that I haven't always had that kind of courage. I grew up in South Africa, where I witnessed all kinds of racial injustice and didn't speak up. And I have my list of excuses. I was young. It was a social construct, and so on. But if I look into it deeply, I can say what was at play was the balancing out between what is the right thing to do and my own sense of self-preservation. And I'll tell you something, not speaking up has haunted me. It haunts me. Number 5, stepping out of the comfort zone. Yay. The quote comes from Lord Chesterfield, who said, "We cannot discover new oceans unless we have the courage to lose sight of the shore." Well, isn't that the heart of our Science of Mind teaching? To go beyond what we know, to go beyond what we identify with ourselves, to never ever put a limit or an end to our conscious expansion of where we might go and what we might express. Oh, but it's easy to say that, but to grow out of, to grow beyond everything that I identify with, this job, this body, this relationship, this everything. Oh, that takes courage and trust that the universe is friendly and doesn't abandon us and opens to new vistas of greatness. Oh. Every time we do a spiritual mind treatment, which is our word for affirmative prayer, that's what it's all about. The shifting of our consciousness to a greater reality. It's never about convincing the cosmic mind to do something. It's about the shift in which we take in more of the magnificence that God has created in this reality. And number 6. Facing hardships with dignity. Aristotle, the ideal person bears the accidents of life with dignity and grace, making the best of it. Now, I know we might say there's no such thing as an accident, but I think we understand exactly what he's writing about. And oh my, in this world, if there isn't room for more dignity and grace. So these are 6 great ideas about the courage that integrity requires. And I want to go back to something I mentioned earlier, and it's the question of what happens in my life when I ignore what is written in my heart, or when I go against my own integrity and I act without courage. Well, I have examples. I'm certain you probably do too. For example, I'm remembering right now a time when I lied to get out of an uncomfortable situation. It wasn't a big lie, it was a white lie. Don't you love that? Yeah. It's a little white lie. It was a lie. And I lied to avoid hurting somebody. That's what I tell myself. But I lied because I don't like to feel uncomfortable, and so I chickened out. You know, I went away from that lie, and I felt like I had food poisoning. I felt sick, depleted, troubled, haunted. And do you know that the little white lie came out in the end? You know, I lost credibility with that person. And I can tell you that even now, years later, I don't think I have regained the trust that we once had between us. Now, I can contrast that with other times in my life when I have worked up the courage to tell the difficult truth about a situation and how I had to work up to it because I was afraid. I had the same fears operating. I don't like discomfort. I don't like hurting people. I don't like confrontation. And yet, I had to sit and work out what is the compassionate way, what is the truthful way, how do I do this with humility. And I told the truth. And the thing is that when I came away from that situation, I didn't feel happy and peppy and joyous, but I did have this feeling of being right with my heart, of being complete. Even though it wasn't easy and it didn't turn out beautifully, I left with a little more integrity than I did when I used lying to manage discomfort. Now, I tell you this because this is the less glamorous part of courage. You see, when we talk about courage, one often thinks about saving lives. Not everybody gets to save a life. Not everybody gets to shape a nation. Not everybody is Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King Jr. Not everybody gets to drag somebody out of a burning house. But every one of us at some point in our life, in the ordinary, everyday things that face us, will meet the moment when we might have to have the courage to ask ourselves, will I tell the truth? And will I do it with compassion? Will I help others to thrive? And will I do it with kindness? Will I delay my own personal gratification so that something else larger that wants to happen may be helped to happen? Will I take a little less so that others may have a little more? The author says, our challenge, our real challenge, is to remember to be our authentic selves when there is no drama and no crisis. Oh, I like that. I like that very much because it reminds me, Edward, don't wait until you're dropped into boiling water to discover what you stand for. Practice now. And Ernest Holmes, our founder, this great quote, he says, get some degree of real conviction and stay with it. The cosmic mind, he says, is neither wishy-washy nor willy-nilly. It is positive and certain of itself. And I think that's the whole message of this month. To move away from willy-nilly to a definite sense, or at least a little more definite sense, of what is in my heart. Now, this whole year, our theme has been values-based spiritual living. We'll be wrapping up the year with a few more Sunday messages and Sunday evening messages about it. And then next year, we are going to carry on deepening our study of the science of mind, because next year is the 100-year anniversary of our movement. And so I think it's worth applauding for. In terms of world religions, we're babies, but nevertheless we have 100 years to celebrate. And so next year's theme is 100 years of science of mind and how to live the science of mind. So we've created a calendar that will help keep you on track with the rest of your community with the themes of each month, and that's available in our bookstore. If you prefer not to use a calendar, we will make all of the topics, all of the speakers, all of the recommended books, and they are just wonderful, available on our website starting in the first Sunday in January so that you can follow along with us. And now it is time for us to pray together. I invite you to breathe in and to exhale, to let your eyes close. And even though I may speak in the first person, this really is for all of us, as if a voice is speaking in your own mind, and feel free to change any words of this prayer to ones that suit you better. I recognize one cosmic reality, that's my word for God today, one eternal, everywhere present source of all that is, an unconflicted source. In other words, there's no opposing power. It's not fragmented. It is not fighting itself. It is what it is, and it is that always, always has been, and always shall be. I recognize it so that I may identify myself as being alive in its aliveness. My mind thinking with its intelligence. I am saturated with the presence of the Almighty. It is written upon my heart, and this I declare to be the truth about everyone. And so together, a realization emerges. I am an expression of the living Spirit, endowed with the freedom to express it or not. And so today, I claim my heritage and I turn to my heart and I let it express through me that which is right and just and true and compassionate and good. And even as I speak these words, I feel the resonance of rightness in me, knowing I have always yearned to live my life that way. And so, even before I complete this prayer, I am flooded with a sense of gratitude. I am expecting already to have the world reflect back to me what I have now accepted in consciousness. This is the way of things. It is done to us, as the master teacher said, whose birthday we celebrate soon, according to our conviction, our faith and our belief. And so I turn with faith and conviction to the heart of the universe of love in me, and I trust it. And I release this word of prayer to that aspect of the divine that we call the law, reminding us that there's no effort involved. A simple acceptance is all that is required. And together we say, and so it is.